the UK sacrifice human rights in exchange for trade and military deals? Well, this is one of the questions that is raised when Britain announced that it would build the first permanent Middle East military base in 4 decades on the Persian Gulf island of Bahrain. UK's Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond says the new facility in Bahrain guarantees the Royal Navy's Persian Gulf presence. In this edition of the debate, we'll ask why the UK feels at this time that it needs a Persian Gulf presence, including the geopolitical implications.
The HMS Jufair in Bahrain's Mir Salman will be the first permanent military facility of Bahrain, east of Suez since 1971. London says the base is part of its 20-year strategy to increase military presence in the Persian Gulf region. It says the HMS Jufair can accommodate more and larger ships, including 2 new aircraft carriers, to reinforce stability in the region. Foreign Secretary Philip Hammond says this shows London's commitment to the security of the region and its partners there.
This will give us the flexibility to respond to any emerging challenge in the Gulf, whether it's from a state actor or a non-state actor, whether it's from within the Gulf or outside the Gulf. This enhances our range. First of all, I would say that this is a dangerous and turbulent region. Look around you. Look at Syria, look at Iraq, look at Yemen, look at the other threats and challenges in the region. I would urge them to feel reassured that the international community wants to make a public statement of its commitment to the security of the Gulf nations by having a physical military presence here.
But there are concerns about a new British expansionist strategy in a region which is considered both an oil choke point and a gateway to Africa. Those opposed to the move say the Middle East will do best without more foreign military presence. They also say the facility, which Hammond said marks a historic cooperation with Bahrain, is a signal to the world that Bahrain deserves to host a second foreign naval base. Bahrain already hosts the US Fifth Fleet. This is viewed as a slap in the face of the continuing pro-democracy protests in Bahrain and further emboldens the repressive and autocratic regime there. The Manama regime has brutally crushed dissent since 2011, killing scores of people in the streets or under torture in prisons. Human rights groups say thousands are also imprisoned for expressing their right to freedom of expression. Another point of controversy is that the base will cost around $23 million to build, with huge annual running costs imposed on the cash-strapped British economy. The new naval base in Bahrain raises questions when, if ever, Britain will end its military interventions in the Middle East, which are widely considered as a threat rather than a boon to regional stability. The facility also puts a question mark next to London's self-asserted commitment to human rights. It exposes the claim as a pretext that enables Britain to pursue its interests in the region.
Our guest joining us for this edition of the debate, former American intelligence linguist Scott Rickard, joins us from Orlando. And we have Senior Congressional Defense Advisor Frederick Peterson, who joins us from Virginia. Gentlemen, welcome. I'll start first with you, Frederick Peterson. It was December 2014 when the UK announced the first permanent Middle East military base in 4 decades in the Persian Gulf island of Bahrain. When you heard that news, were you for the UK doing that or against it?
Well, I think we have to recognize that the UK has had a commitment to the region and a presence in the region for a long, long time. The influence that they are showing by a larger footprint, or shall we say splash print on the ground of another basing for shipping, is a recognition of the reality that this is a very, very volatile region, as it is a very critically important region to the world economy and to peace. I would say that the presence of another British base, in addition to the U.S. presence there, by itself is not necessarily a favorable or an unfavorable development. The question is, what will be the function of this base? How will the assets that are deployed there be used? And what will be the commitment to peace and the commitment to democracy, as your prelude suggested, be on the part of both the United States and the British? I should say that it is important that peace be upon the region, shall we say, and I think that this may be a contribution afford it because of the volatility of the neighbors and the active conflicts that are going on in the region right now. By and large, I think we have to wait and see what the function and what the actual service that this base performs is going to be before we can estimate it as being an asset or a liability to peace in the region.
Okay, so you posed three questions there, Scott Rickard. What is going to be the function of this base? How is it going to contribute to peace? And then one that I find interesting, how the assets are going to be used. I'm going to go for the last question there. How are the assets going to be used, Scott Rickard?
Well, let's be clear. Bahrain is a very small place, and the Americans have a large presence there. What the British are talking about doing is quite small. It's only about $23 to $25 million investment. They're just basically giving themselves some parking spots for some aircraft carriers that they can't afford. And they're going to put some aircraft on there that they don't have. And they're actually looking to the United States and France and other places to provide the aircraft. Because, as the early report said, that government is basically in the same financial outset as the United States. We're borrowing yet again another $1 trillion from thin air, again, to raise the debt ceiling, as they continue to say it every year. And unfortunately, this is not going to contribute to peace at all. This is, once again, the West has supported just horrible dictators that are incredibly repressive. The Bahrain government is an exact example of, say, Saudi Arabia, whereas though in Bahrain, the actual majority population is actually Shiite, and the Sunni oligarchs that own the oil industry there have repressed those people in very peaceful uprisings, trying to look for democracy in that nation. And certainly the West did not ship any arms into that nation, because that nation has been under the West control, as Mr. Peterson said, since the late 1800s, and was actually a protectorate of the UK until 1971, when they got their independence from the UK, and the Americans have been there since 1971.
Well, this is the part, Frederick Peterson, that's very confusing, and that's about the presence not only of the UK, but also of the US there. And when I say confusing is that you have these two countries that, for the most part, are providing weapons, ammunition, military aircraft, etc., to these countries, Bahrain being one of them, Saudi Arabia another, as a matter of fact, all the Persian Gulf countries. Now, why do they need to be there when they've sold them all the equipment? Why can't they take care of it themselves if there's this supposed threat that's out there?
When you have a physical footprint on the ground, or splash print, shall we say, in the Gulf, it creates something more than words. It creates a physical commitment to stability at best in the region. I am not arguing that this is necessarily a policy that will inevitably lead to stability, nor that it is a policy that cannot be, shall we say, misused for the benefit of the UK and for their allies in the region. What I am saying is it provides an opportunity to underline the commitment of outside powers to stability and peace in the region, peace which is everyone's friend. We do not need to see chaos clothed in the false garment of democracy and argue, well, this is somehow a democratic movement that's being suppressed. It is not. Chaos is no one's friend except the very dark forces. And I believe that this may well prove to be, along with the United States presence, along with the other powers that sail the Gulf with the proper objective of peace, it may be an asset. Time will tell, is all I can say. It may well go wrong, but it is an opportunity to go very right and a necessary step in order to preserve, protect, and defend stability and peace within a region. That does not mean necessarily support and propping up of dictators. It means a modest evolution from one form of government to a larger, more broader-based form of government, but not a cataclysmic leap into chaos. I believe that is why they are there. That is the public expression of why they and the United States are there. But it remains up to the leaders and the policies of both countries as to whether that presence is properly employed or improperly employed. If it is improperly employed, your other guest and I would stand shoulder to shoulder in objecting to it and resisting it. But let's give, I hesitate to say give peace a chance, let us give the presence a chance to prove itself for better or for worse, and then make our judgments following that.
Well, the problem is that when you talk about peace, Scott Rickard, when our guest talks about peace and letting that prevail, you would think that it should be in a democracy, but that is what Bahrain is not. So why are they there, knowing that it's not a democracy?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, when you look at they're talking about, the original question that you asked is the assets that they're getting militarily, and why do they need that if they have Western presence as their supposed defense or some strategic location to defend the region? When in fact, Japan's a great example. The Americans did not arm that country early on post-World War II, and certainly were there in presence quite heavily. And Germany was the same way. So if you look at the selective reasoning behind the kinds of arming that's done, certainly it becomes an economic issue whereby the military-industrial complex makes a huge amount of money. The Fifth Fleet brings just a ton of money into the region, as well as far as the support infrastructure for the military weaponry that's sold into Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Those particular operations are just tremendously beneficial to the economic side of the military-industrial complex. So when you talk about, is it going to be peaceful? Absolutely not. We've seen the kind of chaos that's been ensued selectively on Yemen, that's been ensued selectively on Syria, and certainly the Americans have been caught with their pants down in both Syria and Libya, and Saudi Arabia has become the proxy leader for war against Yemen. So no, this is not a cause of peace in the area, and the kinds of democratic solutions that these war machines are causing are certainly not democratic in any means, and have proven to be incredibly horrific and detrimental and destructive to the region.
Well, let's see what Hammond has said, Frederick Peterson, the UK Foreign Secretary. He has said that this facility will, and partnership as he calls it, will tackle shared strategic and regional threats. So what regional threats is he referring to?
Well, regional, this is a very unstable area. We have just seen in the news today, hours ago, where ISIS is being suspected of having shot down a Russian aircraft. Now, we don't know how this is going to play out, but these are the kinds of things that inevitably will draw in and justify involvement of people from outside a region in a region, that region being vitally important to the world economy, simply because they are sitting on natural resources which the world economy craves, needs in order to sustain itself and to grow. Potentially, this is a magnificently rich region with a rich history, with a rich opportunity to grow peacefully and to evolve. And democracy is not something that a fairy godmother comes down and taps you on the head and says you are now a democratic form of government. It's a very sophisticated, very, one would think it should not be so sophisticated, but it is, because it requires a common base of understanding and respect for one another to get along together, number one, to share common form of government, and to recognize diversity among its component parts, and then to grow together and recognize the result of a democratic mandate as deciding a policy direction for the country. We don't have that there at present. Ideally, we can work toward it, but to deceive ourselves somehow that that fairy godmother is hovering overhead and simply by ignoring the history and the competing forces and the brutality that is historically indigenous to the region, that it will somehow go away, is to live in la-la land. We prefer not to. The British presence in that region, along with the American regional presence, can be, not necessarily, but has the opportunity to be a force for stability, a force for growth, a force for emulation of those who wish to grow democratic forms. And we just have to watch, and we in the West must pay special attention to the sagacity of our leadership and to the prudence of their policies. But we also need policies with character. And that is where the question comes down. Is this a policy of character or is it not? Time will tell.
Very well. Let's take a quick time out, listen to some of the viewer comments, and we'll come back to the debate.
Bahrain is making a huge mistake by allowing Britain to station its military in the country. They will soon regret it. It's not a development, it's the beginning of an occupation. Recolonization of Bahrain. To protect Bahraini ruler from foreign invasion, also to protect eastern Saudi Arabia to defend Saudi oil terminals. Didn't surprise me. The criminal Bahraini regime will do everything to stay in as ruler. Looks like another illegitimate ruler selling out to the West. The West's endless support for corrupt and dictator officials across the globe.
Okay, those were some of the viewer comments there. So, Scott Rickard, we need to expand a little bit more about what is going on in Bahrain, and that is the fact that you have a revolution in the making from the year 2011 on till now. And throughout these years, you had Saudi troops coming in the beginning, and relentlessly, off and on, but consistently, you've had the U.S. support and the UK support in the form of arms sales. And this has given the regime there more reason to continue with what they're doing. Now, surely the UK knows that and sees it along with the US. So are they willing to put aside what they preach, democracy, in favor of arms sales?
Well, absolutely. Not only are they willing to put that aside, they've proven that they're willing to cover it up and to basically deceive the Western media and the Western people. You know, individuals like Amber Lyon, who was doing her best to cover the protests legitimately and honestly, lost her job in the media industry trying to report the truth on what the Bahrain government was doing, as you said, with the support of the Saudi government, the American, and the United Kingdom. So no doubt about it, unfortunately, the West, and especially the United States and the United Kingdom, have had a horrible history of basically pushing democracy around the world. I mean, the things that the United States has done in most recent history in South America and in Central America has just proven that they are not the people to be putting in the driver's seat of using force around the world to create some form of peaceful democracy. The things that were done under Noriega in Panama that I witnessed were just horrific. The kinds of activity that this particular dictator did in the drug trade, as well as in the slave trade with women. So this is not something that that I believe that the U.S. and their allies are the experts at. There are certainly people like Frederick Peterson that believe that they've done the right thing under the right government, but certainly they're not in a they're not alone in being used as pawns by a government that has been doing horrific things, not just in Bahrain, but elsewhere throughout the world.
Very well. I saw a reaction there from you, Frederick Peterson. Give it to us in 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds. Well,
Sorry.
I'll just say that no one is claiming that the United States nor the UK are saints from heaven come down to earth to spread a message of peace. However, often that has been the case, that the message of peace has come from flawed parties and characters. The United States is certainly not perfect, and yet we should find one other country on the face of the earth that one would have more confidence when they would come in, that they would be treated fairly and equitably within a range. And I think it would be difficult to find a better partner than the United States, even under its present ambivalent leadership, or the UK. There are many, many far worse choices, and we live in a real world where choices indeed must be made. Choices
Right.
of imperfect.
Unfortunately, I have to jump in and ask Scott Rickard the last question. Scott Rickard, U.S. warships have left the Persian Gulf. This was announced just recently, the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And Philip Hammond has said that the new facility will be a base for much larger ships, including destroyers and aircraft carriers. Are we looking at the UK taking a more active role with what they're doing? And what are their purposes here?
Well, absolutely. The UK is going to be a supportive role. They've always played a supportive role alongside their investments that they've made in the United States military and their investments that they made. And by I say investments, these investments are geopolitical. They've been investing in America since the gold rush. But at the same time, you're looking at heavy cooperation that's been going on, whereby the Americans provide the forces, and a lot of the strategy and logistics and support is provided by the United Kingdom. And certainly by bringing more warships, destroyers, aircraft carriers into the region, it creates more flexibility for the Western naval forces to continue to control the maritime waters, as they've done for over 500 years.
Thank you for that. That does it. Let me thank our guest, former American intelligence linguist Scott Rickard from Orlando there, and Senior Congressional Defense Advisor Frederick Peterson spoke to us from Virginia. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of The Debate. From me, Komet Tagway, and the entire team in the capital, Tehran. It's goodbye.